I told them you hit me so they'd make you come. That was the text my boyfriend sent while I was in the middle of helping keep a patient alive. Not after a breakup. Not after some explosive screaming fight. Not because I had actually done anything. He sent it because he got arrested for drunk driving and wanted me at the police station faster. My name is Natalie Mercer. I'm 29 years old. I'm a respiratory therapist, which means my job is helping people breathe when their own bodies start failing them. I work 3 12-hour overnight shifts every weekend, Friday through Sunday, 7 at night until 7 in the morning. If you've never worked in a hospital at that hour, it's hard to explain the atmosphere. It isn't quiet in the peaceful sense. It's a different kind of quiet. Heavy, mechanical. Ventilators breathing for strangers. Monitors screaming when oxygen levels crash. Families whispering in hallways under fluorescent lights because speaking at normal volume somehow feels wrong. The kind of environment where one delayed decision can change everything. That pressure teaches you strange things. Mostly how to stay calm while your heart is doing something entirely different. That skill is probably the only reason I handled what happened next as well as I did. My boyfriend Ethan was 27. He worked as an office manager at a dental practice. When we first started dating, he was easy to love. Attentive without seeming performative. Funny in a relaxed, natural way. The kind of man who remembered tiny things you forgot mentioning. That I always added extra cinnamon to coffee. That cold leather car seats made me miserable. The name of the dog I had when I was 9. Those details make people feel seen. And in the beginning, I genuinely felt seen. For the first several months, our relationship felt stable, comfortable, predictable in the good way. Then my schedule changed. About 5 months into our relationship, the hospital moved me to permanent weekend nights. It wasn't optional. Night differential meant better pay, and I had student loans, rent, and all the glamorous adult responsibilities nobody warns you about. At first, Ethan said all the right things. Of course we'll make it work. He kissed my forehead when he said it. I believed him. That lasted maybe 2 weeks. Then the comments started. So your job owns you now. Must be nice choosing work over your relationship. My friends actually get to spend weekends with their partners. That last one came up more than once. At first, I tried to be patient. I explained how hospital staffing works, how seniority matters, how healthcare schedules don't magically reorganize themselves around date night. He didn't care, and eventually I realized why. Because this wasn't actually about scheduling. It was about access. Before night shift, Ethan could text whenever he wanted, call whenever he wanted, suggest spontaneous plans, expect immediate replies. I was available. Then suddenly I wasn't. Some people handle that adjustment normally. Some don't. Ethan did not. The shift happened gradually enough that I almost missed it. He wasn't isolated. He had friends, coworkers, a social life. This wasn't loneliness. It was resentment. Over the next few months, he started going out more. At first, I encouraged it. Honestly, I thought it was healthy. Go have fun, I told him. I'm working anyway. That seemed mature, flexible, reasonable. Then the drinking escalated. Not overnight. Just enough at first to feel easy to excuse. Late night selfies from bars, slurred voice notes, calls after midnight while I was actively working. Arguments started over things that made no sense. One Saturday, while I was helping stabilize a patient who had just been intubated, I checked my locker later and found a flood of missed calls. 7 messages from Ethan asking why I was ignoring him. While I was helping someone breathe. I eventually tried addressing the drinking directly, as gently as I could. I've noticed you've been drinking more lately. That conversation ended exactly how you'd expect. He laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, so now you monitor my alcohol intake from your little hospital? That phrase stayed with me. Your little hospital. I'm worried about you, I told him. Maybe I drink because my girlfriend's never around. That was where the conversation died. Or honestly, where the relationship probably should have started dying. But love has an incredible ability to make intelligent people tolerate things they would immediately recognize as unhealthy in someone else's relationship. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday, about 3 weeks later. Busy shift. Controlled chaos. 2 respiratory patients on BiPAP. 1 fresh intubation. Short staffing. Nothing unusual for a hospital weekend. I can't keep my phone with me during active patient care. Hospital policy, obviously, but also basic professionalism. So my phone stayed in my locker. Around 3 in the morning, I finally took my break. I checked my phone. 9 missed calls. A long chain of texts. The first few looked normal. 11:48 p.m. Out with the guys. Miss you. 12:09 a.m. A blurry bar selfie. 12:52 a.m. You should be here. Then, 1:14 a.m. Natalie, I need you to come get me. 1:16 a.m. I'm at the police station. I froze. 1:18 a.m. They arrested me for DUI. 1:22 a.m. I blew a .10. 1:31 a.m. Need bail money. Then the tone shifted. Fast. 1:38 a.m. Why are you ignoring me? 1:44 a.m. Answer your damn phone. Then the message. The one I'll probably remember for the rest of my life. 1:52 a.m. Okay, I told them you hit me last week so they'd make you come. Then, I'll tell them I made it up. And then, don't be dramatic, I just needed you here faster. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, because my brain genuinely refused to process what I was seeing. The break room suddenly felt freezing. He told police I assaulted him, not because he was afraid, not because anything had happened, because he wanted a ride. And I need to explain why that mattered so much. I'm a licensed healthcare professional. An accusation like that doesn't simply disappear because it's false. There are investigations, employment consequences, licensing reviews, background checks, reputation damage, even when you're innocent. Everything I had built, my education, my career, my financial stability, had just been placed at risk because my drunk boyfriend decided weaponizing law enforcement was a shortcut. And the worst part? How casual he sounded. Like he was solving a transportation problem, not detonating someone else's life. My hands were shaking, but my thinking was crystal clear. Medical training does that. When emergencies happen, panic gets replaced by protocol. So I moved into protocol. I screenshotted every message, every timestamp, every admission, then emailed the screenshots to myself, then to a backup account, then synced copies elsewhere. Redundant? Maybe. I call it survival. Then I texted him back. 4 words. I'll be there. Nothing else. Because I needed those messages untouched. I needed him careless, confident, certain I was coming to rescue him. I told my charge nurse I had a family emergency. She took one look at my face and said, "Go." No questions. No hesitation. I left the hospital just before 4 in the morning. And for the first time that night, I felt something stronger than anger. Fear, not of Ethan, of what happens once a lie enters a system built to move quickly. Because sometimes truth wins, but sometimes truth arrives late. The drive to the station felt unreal. Not dramatic in the cinematic sense. No rain hammering the windshield. No soundtrack swelling in the background. Just empty streets, red lights, and the kind of silence that gives your brain too much room to imagine worst-case scenarios. I kept replaying the same sentence. I told them you hit me. It was such a short message, so casually written, and yet it carried enough weight to ruin a life. People who have never dealt with accusations like that sometimes assume innocence automatically protects you. It doesn't. Truth matters. But timing matters too. And when violence is alleged, systems are designed to move immediately, for good reason. Real victims need fast intervention. I understood that. But sitting behind that steering wheel, I also understood how terrifying it is when someone knowingly exploits that urgency. Because even if the truth came out eventually could still cost me everything. My job, my professional reputation, my license, future opportunities. The damage doesn't politely wait for clarification. By the time I reached the station around 3:40 a.m., my chest felt tight enough to hurt. Police stations at that hour all seemed to share the same atmosphere, too bright, too sterile, and far too awake for a place people usually enter on the worst nights of their lives. I walked inside. A younger officer sat behind the front desk, maybe late 20s, nursing what looked like terrible coffee. I gave my name. I was told to come in regarding a domestic incident. The shift in his demeanor was immediate. Not dramatic, but unmistakable. His posture straightened. His expression became careful. The kind of measured professionalism people use when they've already been given a version of you that sounds dangerous. "Please have a seat," he said. "Someone will be with you shortly." So I sat and waited. 10 minutes later, a detective came out. Older woman, sharp eyes, no wasted energy. She introduced herself and asked me to follow her into an interview room. Metal table, 2 chairs, bright overhead lighting that somehow made the room feel even colder. She opened a folder and got right to it. "Miss Mercer, I need to ask you a few questions regarding a report made tonight." I nodded. "Where were you this evening?" "At work." "Where?" I told her the hospital. "What hours?" 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. "Have you ever physically harmed your boyfriend?" "No." "Ever?" "No." She studied me. Not aggressively. Professionally. Then she said the sentence that made my stomach drop anyway. "Your boyfriend states that you assaulted him during an argument last Tuesday." I stared at her. Not because I didn't understand. Because I was struck by how specific the lie was. Not vague. Not impulsive nonsense. Detailed. A fake incident. A fake date. A version designed to sound believable. I answered as calmly as I could. "I was working last Tuesday." "Can that be verified?" "Yes." "Through?" "Hospital badge records, shift logs, staff witnesses." She wrote something down, then looked up. "Is there anything else you'd like to provide?" That was the moment everything changed. I unlocked my phone and slid it across the table. "Yes. I'd like you to read that." She took the phone, scrolled. "Read silently." I watched her face. Or tried to. People in her position are trained not to reveal much. But when she reached the message, "I told them you hit me, so they'd make you come." I saw something shift. Not outrage. Not shock. Recognition. The kind that happens when a story suddenly makes sense. Then she kept reading. "I'll tell them I made it up. Don't be dramatic." She set the phone down. "Excuse me." Then left. I sat there alone for what felt much longer than it probably was. In reality, maybe 20 minutes. Long enough for my imagination to become actively cruel. What if they arrested me anyway? What if the accusation alone triggered hospital reporting? What if HR got involved before facts caught up? What if my licensing board opened an investigation? I've handled medical emergencies where oxygen crashed in seconds. But that kind of waiting? That was worse. Because in medicine, there's protocol, a path, a response plan. Here, I had none. Eventually, the detective returned with another officer. Her tone was still professional, but warmer, more certain. Miss Mercer, would you consent to us photographing the text conversation for evidence? The relief hit so hard I almost felt dizzy. Yes. They documented everything. The entire thread. Every timestamp. Every admission. Nothing selective. Nothing partial. When they finished, the detective sat down again. Miss Mercer, she said, we take domestic violence allegations very seriously. I know. And we also take knowingly false reports seriously. That sentence landed harder than I expected. She continued. Based on the evidence you've provided, along with the verified timeline, your boyfriend's account appears inconsistent. Professional language. But the meaning was clear. He lied. I exhaled. Probably the first real breath I'd taken in an hour. Am I being charged? No. Am I free to leave? Yes. Then I asked the question I already knew I cared about. What happens to Ethan? She folded her hands. The DUI charge proceeds. And the false accusation? That will be reviewed for possible additional charges. Possible. Not guaranteed. But enough. Because a few hours earlier, I had been one fabricated accusation away from watching my life derail. Now the truth existed in official documentation. That mattered. And yet what I felt wasn't victory. It was exhaustion. And grief. Because this wasn't some stranger trying to hurt me. This was Ethan. The man who once brought me soup when I had the flu. The man who used to kiss my forehead before shifts. The man I thought I knew. And somehow, somewhere between resentment and entitlement and alcohol, he became someone willing to weaponize the legal system because he needed transportation. That realization hurt more than I expected. I walked out of the station a little after 5. The morning air was cold enough to sting. I sat in my car without turning the engine on, just staring ahead, trying to process how completely life can shift between one hospital break and sunrise. Then my phone lit up. Ethan's mother. I let it ring, then go to voicemail. At the time, I assumed it would be an apology. I was very, very wrong. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I drove home first. The roads were beginning to lighten with early morning traffic, but everything around me felt strangely distant, like I was watching someone else's life through glass. When I walked into my apartment, my dog came running to the door like nothing catastrophic had happened overnight. That almost broke me. Animals are beautifully uncomplicated. You're home. That's enough. No accusations. No manipulation. No emotional negotiations. Just simple certainty. I sat on the couch in my scrubs, still wearing my hospital badge, holding a cup of coffee that slowly went cold in my hands. Then I played the voicemail. Ethan's mother sounded tired, but not horrified, not apologetic, not even particularly shocked, mostly inconvenienced. Hi, Natalie, it's Ethan's mom. Pause. I just picked Ethan up after they finished processing the DUI. That wording mattered, because even she understood, at least on some level, that this wasn't over. Then she continued. He told me what happened, and honestly, I think emotions are running a little high. I laughed. A short, ugly, exhausted laugh that didn't sound like me. Emotions. That was apparently what we were calling criminal false accusations now. She kept going. He was scared. He was drunk. People say stupid things when they panic. Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement that her son had deliberately told police I committed domestic violence. Then came the sentence that changed how I saw the entire family. Leaving him in jail all night was a little cold, Natalie. I stared at my phone. Because suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't going to be treated as a serious violation. In their version of reality, Ethan was the injured party, even after what he had done. Maybe especially after what he had done. She ended with, I think the mature thing would be for you two to sit down privately and work this out. Privately, meaning quietly, meaning without consequences, meaning protect Ethan. I deleted the voicemail, then immediately recovered it and saved a copy. Because my brain had already changed. Everything was evidence now. By noon, I had hired an attorney. That sentence still feels surreal to say. I had never needed a lawyer before. Never imagined sitting across from one explaining that my boyfriend falsely accused me of violence because he needed faster bail. But one of my coworkers, Marcus, an older respiratory therapist who had been in healthcare forever, didn't hesitate when I told him. Get a lawyer. I wasn't charged. Doesn't matter. Marcus. Natalie. His tone sharpened. When someone weaponizes an accusation like that, you stop reacting emotionally and start protecting your future. He was right. The attorney I hired was exactly the kind of person you want in a crisis. Calm, experienced, completely unimpressed by emotional chaos. I handed over screenshots, explained the timeline, the hospital records, the police interview. He read everything quietly, then set the file down. This is one of the clearest false report cases I've seen. That should have comforted me more than it did. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Then he started giving instructions. Back up everything. Already done. No direct contact with Ethan. Fine. Document every communication attempt from anyone connected to him. That instruction ended up mattering a lot. Then he said the one thing I genuinely didn't want to hear. You should notify your licensing board. I stared at him. Even though I did nothing wrong? Yes. That felt deeply unfair. I was innocent. And yet I still had to proactively explain myself. But healthcare doesn't operate on emotional fairness. Documentation matters. Disclosure matters. Timing matters. So I made the call. It was one of the most humiliating conversations of my adult life. Telling a licensing representative that I had been falsely accused of domestic violence by an intoxicated boyfriend felt awful, even with evidence. But she was professional, took the documentation, logged everything, and confirmed there would be no issue unless formal charges were filed against me. That helped, somewhat, but innocence still didn't feel clean. A few days later, my attorney filed for a temporary protective order, not because Ethan had physically attacked me, because he had demonstrated a willingness to weaponize false allegations. And if someone crosses that line once, you don't assume they suddenly grow boundaries. The temporary order was granted. That should have ended communication. Instead, Ethan simply stopped contacting me directly. Everyone else started. His mother first. Again. This voicemail was angrier, less polished. You filed a restraining order against him? Do you understand how humiliating this is? He's the one who was arrested and traumatized. Traumatized. That word actually made me laugh. I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney. No response. No engagement. Then Ethan's friend texted me. A woman I had met maybe 4 times. Always friendly in the vague, social group kind of way. Her message read, "Hey, I know things are messy, but I think you're going a little too far with the legal stuff." Ethan was drunk and panicked. Then, "He wants to apologize. Can you drop the protective order so he can talk to you?" That was the exact moment I understood how these people saw the situation. Not as a serious threat, not as an attempt to destroy my future, as relationship drama, as hurt feelings, as an overreaction from an emotional ex. I replied, "He told law enforcement I committed domestic violence." Her answer came almost immediately. But he didn't mean for it to go that far. I stared at the screen, then typed, "He got drunk, drove impaired, got arrested, lied to police, named me as the abuser." That wasn't one mistake. That was a chain of decisions. No response. I screenshotted the exchange and added it to the folder. Because yes, by then I officially had a folder. About a week later, my attorney called. The district attorney reviewed the case. I sat straighter. And? They're adding the false report charge. I closed my eyes. Not because I was happy, because suddenly everything became even more real. A criminal charge changes the emotional temperature of a situation. Consequences stop being theoretical. And people who panic when consequences become real can become unpredictable. I asked, because of the texts? Yes. Apparently written confessions with timestamps tend to be persuasive. Who knew? I thought maybe that would finally make everyone stop. Instead, Ethan's mother mailed me a handwritten letter. Actual stationery. Tiny flowers around the border. I wish I were making that up. The letter called me vindictive, cruel, cold-hearted. Accused me of trying to ruin a young man's future over one drunken mistake. Then, buried halfway through, came the sentence that made my attorney physically lean back in his chair. He only said those things because he knew police would take a domestic violence claim seriously enough to contact you quickly. I read it twice, then handed it over. My attorney looked at me, then at the letter, then said, "Well, that's catastrophically unhelpful." Because what she had just done, in writing, was confirmed deliberate manipulation. No misunderstanding, no emotional confusion, no ambiguity, intent. And suddenly the question haunting me changed. It stopped being, "How could Ethan do this?" and became, "How long has this kind of thinking been normal in that family?" Because people usually don't invent this logic from nowhere. My attorney folded the letter neatly, then said something that made my stomach tighten. "This probably isn't over." I asked why. He looked at me calmly. "Because when emotional pressure stops working," he paused, "they usually escalate." And deep down, I already knew he was right. My attorney was right. The escalation came quickly. 2 days after the letter arrived, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. By then, unknown numbers had started making my shoulders tense automatically. I almost ignored it. Something made me answer. "Hello?" A man's voice. Older. Controlled. "Natalie?" "Yes?" "This is Ethan's father." That caught me off guard. In 14 months of dating Ethan, I had spoken to his father maybe twice. He was quiet. The kind of man who seemed to disappear beside louder personalities. At family dinners, Ethan's mother filled every silence while he mostly sat back, nodding occasionally, speaking only when directly addressed. So hearing his voice now felt strange. Unexpected. "Natalie," he said carefully, "I think we need to talk adult to adult." I said nothing. He continued. "Ethan made a terrible mistake." That was the first time anyone in that family had described it honestly. Not a misunderstanding. Not panic. Not emotional confusion. A mistake. A serious one. For a brief second, I thought maybe this conversation would be different. Then he added, "But this false report charge, if it sticks, it follows him forever." And there it was. not accountability. Damage control. He has a career, he said. A criminal record could ruin his future. I stared out my apartment window, because the irony was almost insulting. Ruin his future, as though he hadn't tried to destroy mine first. I answered evenly. He accused me of domestic violence. I understand. No, I said, sharper than I intended. I don't think you do. Silence. Then I continued. If police had believed him without reviewing evidence, I could have lost my professional license. He exhaled. He was drunk. That phrase again. That magical sentence everyone around Ethan seemed to believe erased intent. I stood and started pacing. He was sober enough to choose a very specific accusation. Silence. He didn't say I ignored him. He didn't say I abandoned him. He didn't say I refused to help. He said I assaulted him. I stopped pacing. Do you understand the difference? A long pause. Then quietly. Yes. That almost softened me. Almost. Then he asked, is there anything I can do to fix this? I didn't answer immediately. Then he said, I'll cover your legal fees. I actually blinked. Not because I considered it, because the offer revealed exactly how he saw this. A problem with a price tag. A situation that could be negotiated into disappearing. As though accountability functioned like a reimbursement form. Mr. Walker, I said carefully, this isn't a bill. Silence. Then, I'm trying to help my son. And I'm trying to protect myself. Another long pause. Then his voice softened. I don't think Ethan understood what he was doing. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because maybe he genuinely believed that. Maybe fathers need to believe versions of that sentence to survive loving their children. But I knew better. No, I said quietly. He understood exactly what he was doing. And I meant it. Being drunk can explain recklessness, poor judgment, stupidity, but not strategic manipulation. Naming domestic violence specifically wasn't random. It was chosen. He selected the one accusation most likely to trigger urgency, most likely to involve police, most likely to force my attention. That isn't drunken chaos. That's calculated. Eventually, his father sighed. Then I suppose there's nothing else to say. There isn't. Before hanging up, he said something unexpected. For what it's worth, I am sorry. And somehow that made me sadder than the rest of the conversation. Because unlike Ethan's mother, I believed him. I think he genuinely was sorry. But someone else's sincere regret doesn't erase consequences. After the call, I sat on my kitchen floor with my dog for a while, absent-mindedly running my hand through his fur. I kept thinking about fathers, about disappointment, about what it must feel like to watch your child become someone you no longer fully recognize. But sympathy has limits. Feeling sorry for Ethan's father did not mean volunteering myself as collateral damage. A few days later, my attorney called again. Ethan retained private counsel. That didn't surprise me. What now? His lawyer floated a proposal. I waited. Ethan pleads guilty to the DUI if the false report charge gets dropped. I let out a short laugh. You're kidding. No. Apparently, the argument was exactly what you'd expect. Alcohol, poor judgment, emotional distress, overcharging, excessive prosecution, the usual. What did the DA say? No. Immediately. Firmly. That answer mattered more than I expected. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about my situation. The prosecutor apparently took false domestic violence accusations seriously, not only because they waste resources, but because they undermine legitimate cases. And that mattered, because Ethan hadn't just tried to hurt me. He had exploited a system meant to protect actual victims. His case, according to my attorney, was exactly the kind prosecutors wanted to pursue. Clear evidence, documented intent, minimal ambiguity. Then the hearing date was set. Protective order review, which meant one thing I hadn't emotionally prepared for. Seeing Ethan again. For the first time since the station. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. Walking into that courthouse made my stomach twist in a way I hated. Because memory is cruel. No matter what someone does, some part of your brain still remembers who you thought they were, or who they pretended to be. Love doesn't evaporate cleanly the second betrayal arrives. Sometimes reality changes faster than your emotions can catch up. When I entered the courtroom, Ethan was already there. And for a second, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner and exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, and the kind of flat expression people wear when they haven't really slept in days. Not dramatic movie remorse, real strain, the kind people wear when they haven't been sleeping. His mother sat beside him, rigid, cold, perfectly upright in the kind of posture that communicates blame without words. His father wasn't there. That told me more than anyone saying anything could have. Ethan looked up. Our eyes met, just briefly. And what I felt surprised me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't satisfaction. Just a strange emotional distance, like some part of me had already started letting go long before we ever reached this courtroom. And yet seeing him there made everything feel painfully real in a way I hadn't expected. Then his mother leaned over and whispered something in his ear. His jaw tightened instantly, and whatever softness I felt disappeared. My attorney leaned toward me. Ready? I looked at Ethan, then at the folder containing screenshots, records, voicemails, timelines, and that absurd flower-bordered letter. The physical remains of a destroyed relationship. Then I answered, yes, because whatever happened next, The truth was finally about to be said out loud. Courtrooms have their own kind of silence. Not peaceful silence. Not calm. Controlled silence. The kind where every cough sounds louder than it should, every shuffled paper feels significant, and every whisper makes your nerves tighten. I sat beside my attorney, trying to look steadier than I felt. He looked exactly the same as always. Composed. Measured. The kind of person who probably ordered coffee with the same emotional expression he used in court. I envied that, because my heart was pounding. Not because I doubted the evidence. Because this made everything real in a way screenshots never could. This was no longer a terrible story I was explaining to friends. This was official. Recorded. Permanent. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then sat. The protective order hearing began first. My attorney presented the timeline with almost surgical precision. No theatrics. No emotional performance. Just facts. Ethan's DUI arrest. The fabricated accusation. My verified hospital shift. The detective's documentation. Then the screenshots. The actual text messages. Projected onto a courtroom screen. Seeing those messages displayed in an official legal setting made something twist in my stomach. Because text messages always look smaller than the damage they cause. The judge read quietly. No visible reaction. But judges don't need dramatic facial expressions for a room to understand the weight of something. Then Ethan's attorney stood, and predictably tried to reframe everything. Alcohol. Panic. Emotional distress. Poor judgment. A regrettable decision made while intoxicated. I almost laughed, because they kept trying to make it sound impulsive. Like Ethan had said something reckless in chaos. But nothing about his accusation was vague. Nothing about it was random. My attorney stood, calm as ever. Your Honor, panic does not explain strategic fabrication. That landed. You could feel it. He continued. Mr. Walker did not make a vague complaint. He specifically alleged domestic violence. He selected an accusation designed to trigger immediate police action against my client. Then he paused and delivered the sentence that shifted the room. This was not emotional confusion. This was deliberate manipulation. Even Ethan's attorney went still. Then came the letter. Yes. The absurd handwritten letter from Ethan's mother, complete with decorative flowers around the border, entered into evidence. If it hadn't involved my actual life, the whole thing might have felt ridiculous. My attorney read the key line aloud. He only said those things because he knew police would take a domestic violence claim seriously enough to contact you quickly. The courtroom went quiet in a different way. Heavier, because suddenly intent wasn't implied. It was written, in black ink, by his own family. I looked across the room. Ethan's mother looked furious, not embarrassed, not ashamed. Furious, like she still believed I was the one creating injustice. Then Ethan's attorney made one last attempt. That statement does not establish future risk. My attorney answered immediately. Your Honor, someone willing to knowingly weaponize law enforcement against another person absolutely establishes future risk. The judge reviewed the documents again, asked a few clarifying questions, then ruled. After reviewing the evidence, the 1-year protective order was granted. Officially, Ethan was prohibited from contacting me. No calls, no texts. No emails. No messages through family. No accidental contact through friends. Nothing. I expected relief. And I did feel some. But it wasn't triumphant. It felt heavy. Because needing legal protection from someone you once loved is not a victory anyone dreams about. As we stepped into the hallway afterward, Ethan's mother approached my attorney. She couldn't legally approach me directly. That didn't stop her voice from carrying. I hope she's happy. That word. Happy. As though any part of this had been enjoyable. As though accountability was entertainment. She destroyed my son's life over a text message. My attorney turned toward her with astonishing calm. Ma'am, he said evenly, your son damaged his own life with his actions. My client simply ensured the truth was documented. I wanted to frame that sentence. Ethan's mother didn't look shaken. She looked offended, which somehow said everything. Over the following weeks, the criminal case moved faster than I expected. Unlike the protective order hearing, there wasn't much ambiguity left once the evidence had been laid out. Because Ethan's options were shrinking, the evidence was overwhelming. My hospital verification, police testimony, the text confession, his mother's handwritten admission. There simply wasn't much left to argue. Eventually, Ethan accepted a plea arrangement. Guilty to the DUI. No contest to the false report charge, meaning he didn't formally admit guilt to that count, but accepted the conviction. The sentencing itself was clinical. Efficient. No dramatic speeches. No emotional breakdowns. Just consequences. For the DUI. Probation. Mandatory alcohol education. Community service. License suspension. Ignition interlock requirements. Expected consequences. But the false report charge mattered most. Additional fines. Criminal record. A documented conviction tied specifically to filing a knowingly false report. That changed everything. Because records outlive emotions. Future employers would see it. Background checks would see it. Any future credibility dispute would include it. And maybe that sounds harsh. But I kept thinking the same thing. If Ethan ever tried something like this again, there would now be a documented pattern. When sentencing ended, Ethan stood quietly. There was no apology, no speech, no emotional plea, just silence. And strangely, that hurt more, because some part of me, some embarrassingly human part, had expected something. Remorse, shame, recognition. Instead, he looked emotionally absent, like his body was present, but the rest of him had gone somewhere else. As people started filing out, I looked at him one last time. This time he looked back. Longer, tired eyes, no anger, no pleading, no visible resentment, just emptiness. And something inside me cracked. Not because I wanted him back, not because I regretted what I had done. Because grief doesn't operate logically. You don't only grieve who someone became, you grieve who you believe they were, the future you imagined, the version of your own life that quietly disappeared. I sat in my car afterward and cried. Not dramatically, not uncontrollably, just quietly. The kind of crying that happens when adrenaline finally leaves your body and reality settles into your bones. I had protected myself. I had done the right thing. I knew that. But being right doesn't make something painless. When I got home, my dog greeted me exactly the same way he always did. Tail wagging. Pure joy. Zero awareness that legal proceedings had just altered the emotional architecture of my life. I sat on the kitchen floor beside him, buried my face in his fur, and stayed there far longer than I meant to. Because animals don't ask complicated questions. They don't care about legal outcomes, or betrayal, or emotional fallout. They just stay. And after everything, that simple loyalty felt almost unbearable. I thought the hardest part was over. Legally, it was. Emotionally, not even close. People think justice feels clean. Like a door closing. Like relief arriving all at once. Like the moment the wrong person loses and the right person finally gets to breathe again. That wasn't my experience. What I mostly felt afterward was exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones after your body has spent weeks waiting for the next impact. Legally, the crisis was over. Emotionally, my nervous system clearly hadn't accepted that yet. For days after everything ended, I kept checking my phone every time it buzzed. Even though Ethan legally couldn't contact me. Even though my attorney had confirmed the matter was resolved. Even though logic said I was safe. Trauma doesn't respond particularly well to logic. It responds to patterns. And my brain had learned a terrifying one. That an ordinary work shift could turn into a life-altering disaster during a 15-minute break. That kind of lesson doesn't disappear quickly. A week later, I returned to work. Same hospital. Same overnight shift. Same fluorescent hallways. Same antiseptic smell. Same machine alarms. And strangely, that helped. Hospitals make sense to me. They're chaotic, yes, but predictable in their own way. People get sick. Machines alert you when something is wrong. Staff respond. Problems get addressed. Human relationships, apparently, are far less organized. When I walked onto the unit, my charge nurse looked up from the desk. The same woman who had taken one look at my face that night and told me to leave. She met my eyes, gave a small nod, then said, "Glad you're back." That was it. No interrogation. No awkward sympathy. No whispered curiosity. Just quiet acknowledgement. It nearly made me cry. Instead, I smiled and got to work. Sometimes professionalism is its own kind of kindness. A few days later, I received official confirmation from my licensing board. Case reviewed. Documentation accepted. No disciplinary action. No restrictions. No continuing investigation. My record remained clean. I read the email 3 times, then sat in silence. Because I hadn't fully realized how much fear I was still carrying until that exact moment. Some part of me had still expected one last hidden consequence. One final administrative surprise. Proof that a single malicious lie could keep echoing forever. But it didn't. For the first time in weeks, I took a full breath. Then came the final ridiculous chapter. Ethan's mother, of course, apparently losing in court did nothing to weaken her commitment to blaming me. She somehow got my parents' mailing address. I still don't know how. Maybe through old conversations. Maybe from something Ethan had saved. Maybe from details shared back when our future looked normal. I honestly have no idea. But she mailed them a letter. Several pages, according to my mother, accusing me of cruelty. Claiming I had destroyed a fundamentally good man over a misunderstanding. Painting Ethan as emotionally vulnerable. Me as vindictive. My mother called immediately. Her first question? Are you eating properly? Not hello. Not explanation. Classic mother behavior. Then she said, if that woman contacts this family again, I'm calling the police. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed hard enough to actually feel it. My mother has no patience for manipulative nonsense. Honestly, it helped, because humor returning felt like evidence that I was healing. My attorney advised documenting the letter, so I did, then ignored it. Because eventually, protecting your peace becomes more important than correcting every accusation. And that was the real emotional turning point. It didn't happen in court, during sentencing, or in some dramatic moment of legal victory. It happened later, quietly, on an ordinary Tuesday. I was sitting on the kitchen floor with my dog after work, still half in scrubs, too tired to move. And I realized something. I didn't hate Ethan anymore. Hate requires energy, active energy, and I was done spending energy on him. What I felt instead was clarity, a colder, quieter kind. Acceptance, not forgiveness. Those are not the same thing. Acceptance simply meant I stopped asking impossible questions, stopped replaying conversations, stopped trying to pinpoint the exact moment the relationship changed. Because maybe it didn't suddenly change. Maybe I just finally saw what had always been there. That possibility was harder to sit with, because it meant the warning signs may have existed long before the crisis. Control disguised as attentiveness, neediness disguised as emotional closeness, entitlement disguised as vulnerability. Looking back, I could see the pattern, not through giant dramatic moments, through small ones, comments, expectations, tiny assumptions about access to me. Individually, they were easy to dismiss. Together, they told a story I hadn't wanted to read. People kept asking whether I felt bad. The honest answer? Yes. Watching someone you once loved accept criminal consequences is not satisfying in the way people imagine. Not if the love was ever real, even when they deserved those consequences, even when they created every part of the situation themselves, even when you would make the exact same decision again. Grief doesn't disappear just because accountability exists. I grieve the version of Ethan I thought I knew, the relationship I thought I had, the future I had quietly assumed might happen. But grief is not regret. That distinction mattered. Because sadness doesn't mean uncertainty. I was never uncertain after that text. Not once. The thing that haunted me most wasn't even the lie itself. It was how easy it had been for him. The casualness. The lack of hesitation. I told them you hit me, so they'd make you come. Typed like a practical solution. Like solving an inconvenience. No visible thought about what that accusation could do to my life. My career. My reputation. My future. That was the part I struggled with most. Because recklessness is one thing. Indifference is another. And indifference from someone who claims to love you is its own kind of emotional cruelty. If there's one reason I'm telling this story, it's this. Document everything. Every text. Every voicemail. Every conversation. Because when someone decides to rewrite reality, memory is not enough. Evidence matters. And also this. Protecting yourself is not cruelty. Refusing to absorb someone else's consequences is not vindictive. Boundaries are not revenge. I go back to work tonight. Another 12-hour shift. Patients who need oxygen. Families waiting for updates. Machines that alarm when something is actually wrong. That world still makes sense to me. Healing, I've learned, isn't dramatic. It's quieter than that. Sometimes it looks like legal paperwork. Sometimes it looks like finally sleeping through the night. Sometimes it looks like sitting on your kitchen floor beside a dog who believes your entire worth can be measured by whether you came home. And honestly, that kind of love feels much safer.